The Betazoids fucked up when they killed Max, a human's German Shepherd puppy on Zephyr 6. Now every human wants their alien blood. Lawrence Murray stared at the body of his dead dog, not saying a word. He needed a drink and his plasma rifle. The pale alien freaks were gathered around Max's body, trying to tell Lawrence they'd acted in self-defense. They were only there to buy minerals from the backwater colony. Lawrence balled his calloused fists and shouted at Juno, the spindly alien leader who was trying to apologize. "That was my dog. I raised that dog from when it was a tiny puppy. My dog." Lawrence stepped forward and grabbed Juno by his skinny arms. "You think you can just kill my dog and then buy me off? No." Juno shrugged. "Apologies, human. Your beast attacked us. Do you wish credits to purchase a new one? We can negotiate." Lawrence spit in Juno's black eyes. "Fuck your credits." The human colony leaders pulled Lawrence away from Juno before he could tear the flimsy alien's head off with his bare hands. "Lawrence, please. We need this trade deal with the Betazoids. It's the only thing keeping this colony funded. We're barely scraping by as it is. I know you're upset, but this is bigger than one dog." "Upset? I'll show you upset. You cowards are going to let them get away with killing my dog just so you can keep your precious trade deal? No fucking way. This isn't over." Lawrence stormed off past his modest house to the edge of the dusty human settlement. He had work to do. There was a shallow grave to dig for Max, and revenge to plan against the Betazoids. Lawrence didn't care if the human colony all starved. His dog was dead, and those lanky alien fucks were going to pay. Lawrence sent an encrypted message to Earth on his beat-up transmitter, explaining what happened. The signal bounced through wormhole relays, reaching the gleaming blue and green planet 42 light-years away. Admiral Jameson of the United Earth Defense Force read the message in his pristine office. "Get me the president now," Jameson ordered his aide. "They killed a human's dog. They have no idea the shitstorm that's about to hit them." The footage of Max's lifeless body being dragged away by the bony grey arms of the Betazoids went viral in hours. It was all over the news feeds, outraging hundreds of billions on Earth and the colonies. Candlelight vigils were held in cities across the planet. Protesters marched with signs depicting the dead dog outside Betazoid embassies from Moscow to Tokyo. Rocks and garbage were hurled at the windows. Chants of "Justice for Max" echoed through the streets. Meanwhile, deep in UEDF headquarters, the Admiralty watched the unrest unfold on their view screens with growing unease. "Get the retribution to Zephyr 6 now," Admiral Jameson barked. "I want a Marine detachment to secure that colony immediately, and someone get Captain Parker up here." The UES Retribution, a Cosmos-class diplomatic corvette bristling with nuclear missiles and point defense turrets, departed from space dock and entered warp drive. Its deadly arsenal remained sheathed behind its sleek hull, for now. In the bowels of the ship, Captain James Pitbull Parker inspected his power armor and scowled. Another bullshit diplomatic mission. At least, that's what he thought until his XO, a scarred woman named Vasquez, pulled him aside. "Sir, you're going to want to see this," she said, her voice rough from years of shouting orders over plasma fire. She handed him a datapad with Lawrence's message. Parker read it twice. His blood ran cold. If what this colonist said was true. He keyed the ship-wide comms. "All Marine personnel report to the drop bay for immediate combat drill. This is not a drill. Move it, move it, move it." As the Retribution hurtled through space towards Zephyr 6, Lawrence was in trouble. He ducked into the doorway of a habitation module as searing plasma bolts scorched the metal around him. The Betazoids had found him skulking around their mining camp, and they wanted him dead. Lawrence blind-fired his rifle around the corner, hoping to force the aliens back. No such luck. Thin grey legs were visible through the smoke. The bastards were rushing him. He gripped his rifle and prepared to fight hand to hand. Suddenly, human weapons fire erupted from behind the aliens. Betazoid screams filled the air. Lawrence risked a glance and saw the colonists, armed with rifles and pistols, gunning the aliens down. He recognized Sarah, the doctor's assistant, among the defenders. her clothes splattered with green blood. "Come on," she shouted, gesturing for Lawrence to follow. "There's more of them coming." Together they sprinted towards the colony's shuttle bay, aliens hot on their heels. Lawrence's leg burned from a glancing plasma bolt, but he pushed the pain aside. He had to warn the UEDF about the Zerinium. It all made sense now, why the Betazoids were so eager for this trade deal. The minerals were just a cover. They ducked into the shuttle bay and sealed the doors. Lawrence collapsed into the pilot's chair, fumbling for the shuttle's transmitter. He had to get a message out before the Betazoids jammed the comms. "This is Lawrence Murray to any UEDF ships in range." He panted into the mic, his fingers flying over the console. "The Betazoids are here for Zerinium. It's toxic to us, but they use it for weapons. Some kind of WMD. I don't know. They'll kill us all to get it. We need immediate evacuation and military support. I repeat, we need—" The shuttle bay doors exploded inward. Alarms wailed, gloved hands were dragging Lawrence out of the shuttle roughly. Shit. This was bad. This was real bad. Lawrence wiped the blood and sweat from his eyes, ignoring the sting of the plasma burns on his skin. The abandoned mining facility wasn't pretty, but it would have to do. The small group of colonists he had rescued huddled in the dimly lit control room, nursing their wounds and checking their weapons. "We can't stay here long," Sarah said, her voice muffled by the blood-stained rag she held to her nose. "They'll be coming for us." "I know," Lawrence grunted, fiddling with the facility's ancient comms system. "I'm trying to get a message to the UEDF. Let them know what these Betazoid bastards are really up to." Suddenly a burst of static from the speakers made them all jump. A voice, distorted but unmistakable, filled the room. Lawrence, do you read me? This is Captain Parker of the UES Retribution. We received your message and we're on our way. What's your status, over?" Lawrence grabbed the mic, his heart pounding. "Captain, this is Lawrence. I'm holed up in the old Zerinium mine with a dozen or so colonists. The Betazoids are swarming the place, trying to wipe us out. They can't let us live. Not with what we know about their operation here." "Understood," Parker replied, his voice grim. "We'll be there in—" A burst of weapons fire cut him off. Alarms blared. Panicked shouts filled the comms. "Captain! Captain!" Lawrence yelled. "We're taking fire," Parker shouted over the chaos. "Repeat, we are under attack by a cloaked Betazoid." The transmission cut to static. Lawrence and the colonists looked at each other, dread etched on their faces. Their only hope of rescue was under fire. They were on their own. Hours later, Parker groaned, pulling himself from the twisted wreckage of the Retribution's bridge. Smoke filled the air, stinging his eyes. He could taste blood in his mouth. Forcing himself to his feet, he staggered to the shattered viewport and looked out at the alien landscape of Zephyr 6. The Retribution had crashed in a dense jungle, the purple foliage already starting to curl around the ship's battered hull. Strange animal calls echoed in the distance. An orange sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the crash site. "Pitbull," a voice called out, "over here!" Parker turned to see Vasquez waving at him from the base of a gnarled tree. A handful of Marines, battered and bloodied but alive, were gathered around her. He limped over, mentally taking stock of his surviving crew. "What's our status?" he asked, his voice rough with smoke. "The ship's toast," Vasquez reported. "Comms, weapons, engines, all fucked. We've got maybe a dozen Marines fit to fight. The rest are either dead or too injured to move." Parker nodded grimly. "We're not going to last long out here in the open, especially if that Betazoid ship comes looking to finish the job. We need to find cover, regroup, and come up with a plan to reach Lawrence and the colonists." "What about them?" one of the Marines asked, gesturing to something behind Parker. He turned to see a group of small furry creatures emerging from the underbrush. They looked like a cross between a monkey and a lizard, with intelligent eyes and six-fingered hands. They chittered and chirped to each other, seeming to size up the humans. Parker frowned. "I don't know, but I get the feeling they're not the only things out there. We need to stay sharp and keep moving. Vasquez, salvage what gear you can from the ship. We leave in 5. As the Marines spread out, Parker looked up at the alien sky, his jaw set with determination. They had a long way to go and not a lot of time. He just hoped Lawrence could hold out until they got there. Deep in the abandoned mining facility, Lawrence coughed and gagged, his eyes watering behind his gas mask. A sickly green mist was seeping through the ventilation shafts, filling the air with the acrid stench of death. "Seal off the vents," he yelled to the colonists. "Don't let that shit in here." They scrambled to comply, stuffing rags and debris into the vents, trying to stem the flow of gas. But it was too late. One by one they began to collapse, choking and convulsing on the floor. Lawrence gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to vomit. He recognized the gas. It was a nerve agent derived from xerinium, designed to kill humans in the most horrific way possible. The Betazoids had used it before, in their war against the Karathi. And now they were using it here, on Zephyr 6. He staggered to the control panel, his vision blurring. He had to do something, had to stop the Betazoids before they killed everyone on the planet. His fingers danced over the keys, bringing up a schematic of the mine. There, the main xerinium processing plant, deep in the bowels of the facility. If he could get there, set the reactor to overload. It would mean his death, the death of everyone in the mine. But it would also mean the end of the Betazoids' plans, the end of their secret weapon. It was the only way. Lawrence took a deep breath, the air hissing through his gas mask. He looked at the colonists, at Sarah sprawled on the floor, her eyes glassy and vacant. He thought of Max, of the promise he'd made to avenge his loyal friend. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Then he turned and ran, heading deeper into the mine toward the processing plant and his final stand against the Betazoids. He could only pray that Parker and his Marines would get there in time to save the colony and to make the Betazoids pay for their crimes. Lawrence gritted his teeth as he fired his rifle at the advancing Betazoid soldiers, their grey skin flashing in the strobing emergency lights of the mining facility. He ducked behind a control panel, slamming a new power cell into his weapon. Sweat poured down his face, stinging the cuts on his cheeks. He glanced at the explosive charges he had rigged throughout the room, their timers ticking down. 2 minutes until detonation. 2 minutes to get the hell out of here and blow this place to kingdom come. A plasma bolt sizzled over his head, melting the metal behind him. Lawrence popped up and squeezed off a burst of fire, dropping 2 Betazoids. But more kept coming, their thin bodies pouring through the doorways like a tide of death. Suddenly, human weapons fire erupted from the corridor outside. Betazoid screams filled the air. Lawrence risked a glance and saw a squad of human Marines, clad in black armor and bristling with weapons, storming into the room. At their head was a man Lawrence recognized from the news feeds, Captain James Pitbull Parker, his face scarred and his eyes hard as flint. Parker fired his rifle one-handed, cutting down Betazoids with ruthless efficiency. "Murray," he shouted over the din of battle, "we need to get the fuck out of here." Lawrence nodded, rising to his feet. Together, he and Parker led the Marines in a fighting retreat, blasting their way through the Betazoid ranks. The aliens fell before their onslaught, their blood painting the walls green. As they reached the facility's main chamber, a tall figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Juno, the Betazoid leader, his black eyes glinting in the half-light. He held a plasma pistol in his long-fingered hand. "Stop!" he commanded, his voice echoing through the room. "You will go no further." Parker and Lawrence trained their weapons on him, the Marines fanning out behind them. For a moment, no one moved. "It's over, Juno," Lawrence snarled. "We're blowing this place to hell. You and your xerinium can rot here." Juno shook his head. "You don't understand. My people are dying. Our world is poisoned. Our city's crumbling. Xerinium is our only hope." "And what about us?" Parker demanded. "You were willing to kill every human on this planet to get it." "A necessary sacrifice," Juno replied coldly. "But it doesn't have to be this way. Surrender the evidence. Allow us to continue our work here. In exchange, I will spare the colonists." Lawrence hesitated, his finger tightening on the trigger. The lives of the colonists weighed heavy on his conscience. But then he thought of Max, of the promise he had made to avenge his friend. He shook his head. "No deal, you son of a bitch." Juno's eyes narrowed. He raised his pistol. Suddenly, a stray bullet ricocheted off the wall and struck one of the explosive charges. The detonator beeped once. Then the world went white. The force of the blast threw Lawrence off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. Debris rained down around him, the facility shaking itself apart. Through ringing ears he heard Parker shouting orders, heard the screams of dying betazoids. He pushed himself to his hands and knees, blood dripping from his nose. Juno was gone, lost in the chaos. Lawrence staggered to his feet, grabbing Parker's outstretched hand. Together, they rallied the survivors and fought their way out of the collapsing facility, dodging falling rubble and gouts of flame. They burst into the open air, coughing and gasping. The ground shuddered beneath their feet as the charges detonated, the mining facility imploding in on itself in a maelstrom of fire and smoke. But as the dust cleared, Lawrence's heart sank. A massive betazoid warship hovered overhead, its weapons aimed directly at the ragged group of humans. Parker cursed under his breath, raising his rifle in defiance. But before the aliens could open fire, a new sound filled the sky, the roar of human engines. Lawrence looked up to see a fleet of UEDF ships dropping out of orbit, their hulls gleaming in the sun. The betazoid ship hesitated, caught between its prey and the sudden arrival of reinforcements. For a long moment the two fleets faced each other, weapons primed and ready. Then, slowly, the betazoid ship began to rise, pulling away from the planet's surface. Lawrence let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. In the end, a tense truce was brokered. The betazoids would leave Zephyr 6 and face judgment before a galactic tribunal. The colony would be left in peace, the humans allowed to rebuild. But as Lawrence stood on the landing pad, watching the alien ships disappear into the sky, he felt no sense of victory, only a hollow ache in his chest, a grief that threatened to consume him. Max was gone, and no amount of justice could bring him back. He turned to Parker, his eyes haunted. "I'm done here," he said quietly. "I'm going back to Earth. There's nothing left for me in the stars." Parker nodded, understanding in his eyes. He clasped Lawrence's shoulder. "You did good, Murray, real good. The UEDF could use a man like you." Lawrence shook his head. "I'm no soldier, not anymore." He boarded the waiting shuttle, his mind whirling with conflicting emotions. As the craft lifted off, carrying him away from Zephyr 6 and the ghosts of his past, he received a message from Admiral Jameson. "Son, I heard what you did down there. You showed true grit and courage in the face of the enemy. The UEDF needs leaders like you. I'm offering you a commission, a chance to make a real difference in this galaxy. The choice is yours." Lawrence stared at the words, torn between his desire for peace and his thirst for justice. The wound of Max's loss still ached like a missing limb. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to honor his friend's memory. He closed his eyes, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. The shuttle flew on, carrying him into an uncertain future, where the fate of humanity and the uneasy peace with the betazoids hung in the balance. Months had passed since Lawrence returned to Earth, but the scars of Zephyr 6 remained etched into his soul. Night after night, he woke in a cold sweat, Max's lifeless body haunting his dreams. The betazoids had agreed to stand trial, but the wheels of galactic justice turned slowly. Too slowly for Lawrence's liking. He tried to lose himself in the mundane routines of civilian life, but the emptiness in his heart would not abate. Then, on a nondescript Tuesday evening, a message appeared on his personal terminal. The sender was anonymous, the contents cryptic. "The trial is a farce. The betazoids' crimes run deeper than you know. Seek the truth in the shadows of Earth." Lawrence leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Could it be a trap? A twisted game orchestrated by his enemies? Or a genuine lead, a chance to finally uncover the full extent of the betazoids' machinations? He knew he couldn't ignore it. The next day, Lawrence found himself standing outside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The anonymous tipster had provided coordinates, leading him to this desolate spot. With a deep breath, Lawrence pushed open the rusted door. The interior was dark, the air thick with the stench of chemicals. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed a faint blue glow emanating from the far end of the warehouse. Lawrence crept forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The glow intensified, revealing rows of cylindrical tanks filled with a shimmering liquid. Suspended within each tank was a human figure, their features obscured by a web of tubes and wires. A terminal stood at the center of the room, its screen flickering with data. Lawrence approached it cautiously, his fingers flying over the keys. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The tanks contained human test subjects, their bodies infused with xerinium. The project's aim was to create a new breed of super soldier, immune to the substance's toxic effects and imbued with enhanced strength and resilience. But that wasn't the worst of it. The project was being overseen by none other than Admiral Jameson, the man who had sent Lawrence to Zephyr 6 in the first place. And he wasn't working alone. Scattered throughout the files were references to a shadowy figure known only as the Overseer, a Betazoid mastermind pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Lawrence's mind reeled with the implications. The Betazoid's actions on Zephyr 6 were just the beginning, a small part of a much larger conspiracy. Earth itself was compromised, its military leadership working hand in hand with the enemy. He knew he had to act fast. Lawrence downloaded the files onto a data drive, his hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. He had to expose the truth, bring the perpetrators to justice. For Max, for the colonists, for every human who had suffered at the hands of the Betazoids. As he turned to leave, a voice echoed through the warehouse. "You should have left well enough alone, Mr. Murray." Admiral Jameson stepped out of the shadows, flanked by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. Lawrence reached for his weapon, but it was already too late. The soldiers opened fire, plasma bolts scorching the air. Lawrence dove for cover, his mind racing. He was outgunned and outnumbered, but he refused to go down without a fight. Suddenly, a second group of figures emerged from the darkness, their weapons trained on Jameson and his men. Lawrence recognized them as fellow UEDF officers, men and women he had served with in the past. "Surrender, Admiral," one of them shouted. "It's over!" Jameson sneered, his face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. The Overseer's plan is already in motion. You can't stop it." With those words, all hell broke loose. Lawrence and his unexpected allies fought side by side, plasma bolts filling the air. The smell of burnt flesh and ozone filled Lawrence's nostrils as he pushed forward, determined to reach Jameson. Amidst the chaos, a tall figure emerged from the shadows. The Overseer, his black eyes glinting with malice. Lawrence charged forward, tackling the Betazoid mastermind to the ground. They grappled on the cold concrete, trading blows with savage fury. The Overseer laughed, his voice filled with cruel amusement. "You think you're a hero, don't you?" he hissed. "But you're just a pawn, a piece on the board. We killed your precious dog to set you on this path, to make you the perfect instrument of our will." Lawrence roared with primal rage, his vision turning red. He slammed the Overseer against the ground, his hands wrapped around the Betazoid's throat. But the Overseer just smiled, his teeth stained with his own blood. "You can't win, human. The xerinium will be your downfall." Lawrence's eyes widened as he realized the truth. The damaged tanks, the leaking substance, the whole facility was about to go up in flames. "Get out," he yelled to his allies. "The whole place is going to blow." As the whistleblowers retreated, Lawrence turned back to the Overseer. He knew what he had to do, one life to save billions. He dragged the Betazoid towards the tanks, ignoring the searing pain as the xerinium seeped into his skin. The Overseer struggled, but Lawrence's grip was unbreakable. With a final burst of strength, Lawrence plunged them both into the shimmering liquid. The world went white, then black. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in a field of golden wheat. Max was there, barking happily, his tail wagging. Lawrence fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I'm so sorry." As the facility collapsed in on itself, burying the twisted conspiracy beneath tons of rubble, Lawrence closed his eyes for the last time. He had given his life to expose the truth, to ensure that the Betazoid's crimes would not go unpunished. The galaxy would never be the same. The fragile peace between humans and Betazoids was shattered, the scars of betrayal running deep. But in the end, Lawrence had kept his promise. He had fought for justice, for the memory of a loyal friend. And in that final moment, as the darkness claimed him, Lawrence found the peace he had sought for so long. The story of a man and his dog had come full circle, a tale of love, loss, and sacrifice that would echo through the ages. In the end, it was not the strength of weapons or the power of armies that had made the difference, but the unbreakable bond between a human and his faithful companion. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.